I want you to take a moment and just look at your smartphone. It's probably sitting right there on the desk next to you, or maybe you're even holding it right now. It's this seamless slab of glass. It's a portal to everything. Your bank, your TV, your maps, your camera.
It's your entire life in your hand.
It is. For all intents and purposes, it's a magic wand. But I want to take you back to a very specific moment, not that long ago, really. A moment where the ancestor of that device, the machine that kind of kicked off this whole mobile revolution, it didn't just become obsolete. It essentially died.
And when we say died, we're not being metaphorical here like, oh, people stopped buying it. We are talking about a functional, definitive, hard stop death.
Exactly.
The kind where the screen just goes dark and that little red light never blinks again.
The date was January 4th, 2022. It sounds so recent, doesn't it? But that was the day the servers went cold.
That was the official decommissioning date for all BlackBerry legacy services. The
end of an era. And I think for a lot of people, that news blip just came and went. But if you really unpack what happened on that day, it's just wild.
It's not just no more software updates.
No, this was BlackBerry Limited, the company, literally flipping the off switch on the entire infrastructure that powered devices running BlackBerry 7.1 OS and earlier, and BlackBerry 10.
Right. So if you were one of those diehard fans still clinging to a BlackBerry Classic or a Bold, in early 2022, you woke up that morning and your phone was, for all intents and purposes, a paperweight.
We're talking no data connection, sure. That's a given. No SMS text messages.
But the kicker, and this is the part that gets me, is no ability to even dial 911.
That is the part that blows my mind. A phone that cannot call emergency services is no longer a phone.
It's not.
It's just a nostalgic brick of plastic and silicone.
It's the ultimate form of obsolescence, really. Usually, old tech just gets slow. It stops getting updates, the apps don't work. But it doesn't lose its most fundamental utility, the ability to maybe save your life.
Yeah.
This shutdown marked the true functional death of the classic BlackBerry, and it really serves as the final period at the end of a very long, very dramatic sentence.
And that right there is our mission for this deep dive. We aren't just here to eulogize a gadget. We're going to unpack the entire saga of research in motion, or RIM.
Right.
This is a story about a small Canadian company that went from soldering circuit boards for pagers to creating a global medical condition. I mean, we literally called it an addiction, and then just spiraling into near total irrelevance in the hardware market.
It is arguably one of the most dramatic rise and fall stories in the history of modern technology. I mean, you've got brilliant engineering, you have what looks like corporate espionage, you have international diplomatic incidents.
And you have a cultural phenomenon that just fundamentally rewired the human brain.
Absolutely.
But before we get into the nuts and bolts of the hardware and the servers, we have to talk about that rewiring. We have to talk about the crackberry.
The crackberry. It's one of those terms that if you weren't there, it probably sounds like some kind of, crazy hyperbole.
But it wasn't.
It really wasn't.
No, it was literal. I mean, get this. Webster's New World College Dictionary formally recognized the word crackberry in 2006.
Wow.
Think about the cultural saturation you need for a dictionary to basically say, yes, this specific brand of phone is now synonymous with a dependency disorder.
It really speaks to the sheer behavioral shift it caused. You have to remember the context of the late 90s and early 2000s. Before BlackBerry, email was. It was a destination.
Right.
You went to check your email, you sat down at a desk, you booted up a PC, you listened to that awful modem screen.
The dial-up sound, oh my God.
Exactly. And you waited. You were tethered to a physical place.
It was the whole you've got mail era. It was an event. You planned it.
Precisely. And BlackBerry just severed that tether. It created the always-on culture we now live in. Suddenly, the inbox was in your pocket. You could be in a taxi, at a dinner party, or in bed, which was, the source of so many arguments back then, and you were connected. It didn't just change how we worked. It completely changed the expectations of availability.
It just collapsed that boundary between work time and lifetime, and the numbers.
Yeah.
The numbers really reflect that obsession. I was looking at the subscriber stats in our source material, and the growth curve is practically a vertical wall.
It's incredible.
At its absolute peak, September 2011, there were 85 million BlackBerry subscribers worldwide.
85 million.
Yeah.
And you have to put that in the context of 2011. That is a massive, massive global footprint. But what's even more fascinating to me is the speed of the collapse that followed.
The drop-off it's terrifying from a business perspective. By March 2016, so less than 5 years later, that number had plummeted from 85 million down to 23 million.
A huge drop.
And by the fourth quarter of 2016, just a few months later,
The global market share was effectively 0.0%.
0.0, from owning half the market to a rounding error in 5 years. That is what we need to dissect. How on earth do you lose 85 million people that quickly?
Well, to understand the fall, you really have to understand why they rose so high in the first place. And that story doesn't start in Silicon Valley. It starts in Waterloo, Ontario.
The Silicon Valley of the North, as they called it.
Exactly. This is the home of Research in Motion, RIM, founded by Mike Lizaritis. And Lizaritis is such a key character in all of this because he wasn't one of those move fast and break things software guys.
No.
He was an engineer's engineer. He was completely obsessed with radio frequencies, battery efficiency, the physics of data transmission.
They didn't start with phones, did they? They started with pagers.
That's right.
And again, for some of our younger listeners, a pager was usually just a little black box that beeped and showed you a phone number, and then you had to go find a payphone to call the person back.
A one-way street.
But RIM wasn't making those dumb pagers, were they?
No, RIM was already pushing the envelope with two-way paging. They launched the Interactive Pager 900 way back in 1996. It was a clamshell device, so it flipped open, and it had this tiny little keyboard. You could actually type a reply.
That's the breakthrough right there, closing the loop.
Right. Then came the 950 in 1998, which was about the size of a bar of soap. But the real inflection point, the device that we can point to and say, that's the one, that's the start, was the BlackBerry 850. It was released on January 19th, 1999.
Let's just pause on the branding for a second, because BlackBerry is such a perfect name. It's organic, it's friendly, it's memorable. It stands out so much against these technical names like Interactive Pager or Palm Pilot. Where did that come from?
It was no accident. They actually hired a professional firm called Lexicon Branding. These are the pros who name things like the Pentium chip.
Oh, wow.
And the story goes that the branding experts were examining the device, specifically looking at that little keyboard.
The tiny clicky buttons.
Right. And someone in the room remarked that the keys look like the drupelets of a fruit.
Drupelets. Is that a real word?
It's the botanical term, apparently, for the little individual bumps that make up a berry, like on a raspberry or a blackberry.
Huh. I learned something today.
So they started brainstorming fruit names. They apparently considered strawberry, melon, even some vegetables.
Just shoot me a message on my melon. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
It really doesn't.
Hmm.
And they felt strawberry sounded too slow, like you stroll through a strawberry field. I don't know the logic. But blackberry just felt snappy. The device was black. The keys looked like the fruit. It just clicked. And it beat out something like 40 other names to become the winner.
And it was brilliant because it totally softened the technology. It made this high-tech business communication tool feel approachable. But here's the thing. The 850 was still, at its heart, a pager. It did email, but it wasn't a phone. When did voice actually enter the picture?
This is where the evolution gets a little clunky. The first device that was technically a phone was the BlackBerry 5810, which came out in 2002. But it had this one fatal flaw that is just hilarious in hindsight.
Oh, I know this one. It's the headset requirement, isn't it?
It is baffling to think about now. The device had no internal microphone and no ear speaker. So if you wanted to make or receive a phone call, you had to physically plug in a wired headset.
Just imagine the scene. You're this high-powered executive in 2002, your fancy new BlackBerry rings, and you're frantically untangling a wire from your pocket just to answer, hello?
It's absurd. It effectively meant you couldn't use it as a spontaneous phone. It was a data device that could do voice if you were prepared for it. But here's the crucial insight. It didn't matter.
Why not? That seems like a huge deal.
Because voice wasn't the killer app. The killer app was push email.
Okay, we need to go deep on this because today, push notifications are just standard. Everything is pushed to our phones. But back then, this was absolutely revolutionary. Explain the difference between polling and push in a way that shows why RIM was so far ahead of everyone.
Sure. So in the pre-BlackBerry era, if you had a mobile device like a Palm Pilot with a modem attachment or something, you used a system called polling. Think of polling like you walking out to your physical mailbox at the end of the driveway. You walk out, you open the box, you check inside, it's empty, you walk back to the house. 10 minutes later, you're curious, so you walk out again, check again. Still empty.
It's active. You are doing all the work. Your device is doing the work.
Exactly. And in computing terms, that work costs battery life and data. Every time it polls, your device has to wake up its radio, establish a connection with the server, handshake, Ask, is there any mail for me? Mhm. Get a no, and then shut the radio down again. Doing that constantly just drains the battery incredibly fast.
So what did BlackBerry do that was so different?
They completely reversed the flow. They introduced the NOC, the Network Operations Center. This was their centralized fortress of servers in Waterloo.
Right.
So when an email hit your corporate exchange server at your office,
Yeah.
the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, or BES, would grab it, compress it, encrypt it, and fire it instantly to the NOC.
So the NOC is like the central traffic cop for all BlackBerry data.
Exactly. And the NOC maintains a constant but very, very low-energy heartbeat connection with your device out in the field. It's just this tiny trickle of data. The moment the NOC gets that email, it pushes it down that always-on pipe to your device.
So to use your analogy, instead of me walking to the mailbox every 10 minutes, the mailman literally walks into my house and hands me the letter the second it arrives.
That's a perfect way to put it. And because of the incredible compression they used, I mean, they were stripping out all the heavy HTML code, the big headers just sitting in the raw text. It was ridiculously efficient. A BlackBerry could last 3 or 4 days on a single charge because its radio wasn't constantly screaming for a connection. It was just listening quietly.
That battery life was a huge part of the addiction. You just didn't have to think about it. But the other part of the addiction was the input method, the keyboard.
A glorious QWERTY keyboard.
It really popularized thumb typing. Before this, people were either using a stylus on a Palm Pilot, trying to write in that weird graffiti shorthand, or they were using T9 on a number pad, hitting the number 7 4 times just to get the letter S.
It was painful. BlackBerry just said, no, we're giving you a miniature typewriter for your thumbs. And the tactile feedback of that click was so essential. The click was a confirmation. You didn't even have to look at the screen. People became masters at typing under the conference room table.
The blind type. That was the ultimate power move, wasn't it? Maintaining perfect eye contact with your boss while you're secretly emailing your spouse about what to pick up for dinner.
It was. And we can't forget the navigation, which was just as genius. The side-mounted scroll wheel.
Oh, the wheel. That click, click, click was so satisfying.
It was a fidget toy before fidget toys were a thing.
Yeah.
You could just scroll through endless emails with just your thumb. Later, they moved to the Pearl trackball, which was amazing until it got full of pocket lint.
And then the optical trackpad, which finally solved the lint problem. But that perfect combination, the push email for speed, the keyboard for input, and the wheel for navigation, it created this loop of efficiency that was just intoxicating.
But there was one more layer to this ecosystem, a kind of digital velvet rope that kept you locked in and made you feel part of an exclusive club.
BBM.
BlackBerry Messenger.
This is really where the story shifts from just being a business tool to becoming a social lifeline. I mean, before WhatsApp, before iMessage, before Instagram DMs, there was BBM.
BBM was the original mobile instant messenger, and it was exclusive. It didn't use your phone number. It relied on the PIN.
PN, that 8-character code. Mine was something like 20F3A99. It looked like a license plate or a secret code.
It was hexadecimal.
Yeah.
And unlike a phone number, which you can port to a new carrier or a username that you can change, the PIN was hard-coded to the silicon of that specific device.
So your identity was physically, inextricably tied to the hardware in your hand.
Yes. And to message someone, you had to exchange pins. It became this whole ritual. What's your pin? Was the ultimate pickup line in a bar in 2005. It was a completely closed loop. If you didn't have a BlackBerry, you weren't invited to the party.
And it introduced features that completely changed social anxiety forever. I'm talking about the D and the R.
Delivered and read. The original blue ticks from iMessage.
The R, the absolute trauma of the R. Seeing that someone had read your message and was actively choosing not to reply, BlackBerry literally engineered that specific brand of modern anxiety.
They did. But there was also a very practical, economic reason for BBM's dominance, especially in markets outside of North America.
It was the cost, right?
It was a huge factor. You have to remember, in the mid-2000s, SMS text messages cost money. You paid 10 cents, 20 cents per message, or maybe you had a monthly plan with a bucket of 100 texts.
I vividly remember going over my text limit as a teenager and my dad absolutely losing his mind at the bill.
We all do. BBM, on the other hand, used data. And because the data packets were so tiny and compressed, it was virtually free if you had even the most basic data plan. You could send 10,000 BBMs for the cost of 0 SMS messages. In markets like Indonesia, South Africa, and the UK, this made BlackBerry the default phone for teenagers. It wasn't a business tool there. It was a chat machine.
We should circle back to Indonesia later because that's a whole fascinating subplot in itself. But I want to pivot from the teenagers to the complete other end of the spectrum, the spies and the presidents. Because the other massive selling point of the whole PIN system was security.
This is where BlackBerry just completely dominated the enterprise world. They had the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, the BES.
Right.
This allowed a company's IT department to have total granular control over their fleet of devices. They could remotely wipe a phone if an employee lost it. They could enforce password policies. It was a CIO's dream.
And the encryption.
End-to-end encryption between the device and the corporate server. Initially, it was triple DES. Later, it was upgraded to AES. For years, it was considered the Fort Knox of mobile communications.
It was so secure that the U.S. government was their single biggest customer. And of course, we have to talk about the most famous user of all time, Barack Obama.
The first BlackBerry president.
When he won the election in 2008, there was this legitimate battle between him and the Secret Service.
There was. The standard protocol was no outside devices. The President of the United States does not carry a personal cell phone. It's a security risk. It's a tracker. But Obama was an addict. He fought for it. He said he needed it to stay connected to the real world, to escape the White House bubble.
So they had to come to a compromise.
They did. The NSA actually had to custom build him a device. They took a BlackBerry 8830 World Edition, and they strip-mined it. They removed the camera, the microphone, the GPS, basically everything fun, and then they loaded it with their own custom-hardened encryption software. It could only communicate with a tiny handful of whitelisted people, like his chief of staff and his family.
But he got to keep it. And marketing experts at the time estimated that that single image, the President of the United States looking down at his BlackBerry, was worth somewhere between $25 and $50 million in free advertising.
It completely solidified the brand's identity as the serious choice. The message was, if it's secure enough for the nuclear codes, it's secure enough for your quarterly earnings spreadsheet.
And it wasn't just him. Hillary Clinton famously used one as Secretary of State, which, well, we all know that led to some email server controversies down the line, but it proves the point about its prevalence in government. And the source material also mentions police forces.
Yeah, the West Yorkshire Police in the UK, police forces in India. The logic was all about efficiency. If an officer can run a license plate or file a report right from the street on their BlackBerry, they don't have to drive all the way back to the station to use a desktop. It kept cops on the beat longer.
So if we paint the picture, we have this image of absolute total dominance. The corporate world is locked in through the BES. The government is locked in through security. The teenagers are locked in through the free messaging on BBM. It just feels unbreakable.
It certainly must have felt that way to them in, say, 2009.
But they got greedy. Or maybe ambitious is the kinder word. They weren't content with just the suits and the spies. They wanted the regular consumer, too.
The big consumer pivot. This is where we see the launch of the BlackBerry Pearl back in 2006.
The Pearl was a totally different device. It was skinny, it came in different colors, it had a camera, it had a media player.
It was explicitly designed to look good in a purse or a pocket, not just hang off a belt clip in a leather holster.
Yeah.
And you know what? It worked. This is when the celebrity culture around BlackBerry just exploded.
The list of users is a complete who's who of the 2000s. You have Kim Kardashian,
A self-confessed addict. She was famous for saying she stockpiled old BlackBerry Bold models that she bought on eBay just to have backups because she was terrified they would stop making them. She needed that physical keyboard for her typing speed.
Jay-Z, Beyonce, and here's a stat from the source that just blew my mind. Eminem.
Marshall Mathers, yeah.
The source material says that as of 2024, he reportedly still uses a BlackBerry OS phone.
Talk about brand loyalty. But you can kind of see why, right? He's a famously private person. He probably wants a tool that just does communication, not a distraction machine with a million apps.
So hit us with the peak numbers. When was RIM officially on top of the world?
The year was 2009. At that point, RIM held 56% of the entire U.S. smartphone market. Fortune magazine ranked them the #1 fastest growing company in the world. They were just printing money.
56%. That is basically a monopoly. And yet, and this is the real tragedy of the story, by 2009, the seeds of their destruction had already been planted and had been growing for 2 full years.
January 9, 2007, the Mac World Expo in San Francisco.
Steve Jobs.
He walks out on stage and introduces the iPhone. And the mythology around this event is often that the executives at BlackBerry just ignored it, that they laughed at it.
Is that true? Did they laugh at it?
Not exactly. They did see it, but they just fundamentally misunderstood what it was. And to be fair to them, from their very specific engineering-focused perspective, the original iPhone was a disaster.
It kind of was. It ran on the slow 2G network, not 3G. It had no copy-paste, no MMS messaging. The battery life was atrocious compared to a BlackBerry. And the keyboard, trying to type on glass felt like tapping on a table. It was awful.
Right. Mike Lazaridis, the founder, looked at the iPhone and he said, basically, this is a toy. It consumes a massive amount of data. The battery won't last a day, and you can't type on it. No serious lawyer or banker will ever give up their physical keyboard for a sheet of glass.
He viewed the phone as a productivity tool, an email and messaging machine.
Exactly. Riem was optimizing for production, for writing words, for sending messages. Apple was optimizing for consumption, for browsing the real web, looking at photos, watching videos.
And RIM completely missed the fact that even serious business people like to have fun sometimes.
Precisely. There's a story in one of the books about BlackBerry that when RIM's engineers first got an iPhone and tore it down, they thought it was fake. They looked at the size of the screen and the speed of the processor and said, this is impossible. The battery logic doesn't work. It must be some kind of trick.
They were so entrenched in their own engineering constraints, bandwidth conservation, battery efficiency, that they couldn't imagine a world where people would just accept charging their phone every single night.
And that mindset, that sort of engineering hubris that we know better than the user, is what started the slide. By 2010, the iPhone 3GS had overtaken the BlackBerry curve as the best-selling device in the US. Android was rising fast, and BlackBerry started to panic.
And from that panic came the BlackBerry storm.
Oh, the storm. 2008. This is their big rushed answer to the iPhone.
And it was so weird.
It was a touchscreen, but because they were so obsessed with the idea of tactile feedback, the click of a keyboard, they made the entire screen one big mechanical button. The whole glass panel physically moved down and clicked when you pressed it.
Sure press, they called it.
It was a complete disaster. The mechanics failed all the time. The software was rushed and incredibly buggy. It was slow. It was the first time that loyal BlackBerry users picked up a new device from the company and said, wait, this is garbage.
It really damaged the brand's reputation for quality. But even if the hardware had been perfect, they had a much, much bigger problem looming. The app gap.
This was the true killer, the real Trojan horse. Apple had the App Store. Google had what was then the Android market. Developers were flocking to these new platforms because the tools were great, and there was a hungry audience of millions.
And BlackBerry.
BlackBerry OS was built on an old, clunky Java-based platform. It was designed for security and efficiency, not for playing Angry Birds or scrolling through Instagram or hailing an Uber.
So while you're friends with iPhones or hailing a cab with an app, you're stuck trying to look up a local taxi number on a slow, clunky web browser on your BlackBerry.
That's exactly the problem. They tried to fix it. They released the Playbook tablet in 2011, which was actually a pretty nice piece of hardware, and they built an Android player into it, which was supposed to let you run Android apps on a BlackBerry device.
But emulation is never as good as the real thing, is it?
Never. It was buggy, it was slow, and it was a complicated process for developers. It was like putting a small Band-Aid on a massive, gaping wound.
And then, as if the fierce competition wasn't enough, the one thing BlackBerry had left, their rock-solid reputation for reliability, it just imploded.
The great crash of 2011.
We talked about the NOC earlier, that centralized fortress that made everything so efficient.
Well, the major downside of a centralized fortress is that it's a single point of failure. If the NOC goes down, everyone goes down.
And in October of 2011, it went down hard.
A core switch failed at their data center in Slough, in England. And for reasons that are still kind of murky, the backup system failed to kick in properly. The backlog of messages started to cascade and spiral out of control. For days, literally for days, millions of users across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and eventually North America had nothing. No email, no BBM.
Just imagine the business chaos, deals being missed, critical communications just cut off.
It was a nightmare. It cost the company an estimated $50 million in service credits they had to give to carriers. But the reputational damage was incalculable. It broke the trust. People all over the world suddenly realized, wait a minute. If this one server room in England breaks, my phone is completely useless. Why am I paying a premium for this?
So the walls are just closing in from all sides. But before we get to the final financial collapse, we need to talk about a massive legal battle that almost killed the company way, way before the iPhone was even a glimmer in Steve Jobs' eye. Because this is a part of the story people often forget.
The NTP lawsuit.
Yeah.
This is a legal thriller that honestly deserves its own movie.
So who or what was NTP?
NTP Inc. was a patent holding company based in Virginia. Now, critics would call them a patent troll. They didn't make any products. They didn't have a factory or employees in that sense. They just held patents. And one of those patents, they claimed, covered the fundamental concept of wireless email.
The concept, that seems incredibly broad.
It was. They sued RIM way back in 2000. And RIM, being this group of proud Canadian engineers, largely just dismissed it. They thought, this is absurd. We invented this technology from scratch. These guys are nobodies. The court will obviously see that.
A classic case of engineering hubris in the courtroom.
A fatal case of hubris. The jury didn't understand all the technical nuance. They looked at the broad language of the patent. They looked at what BlackBerry did, and they said, yep, that looks the same to us. They found RIM guilty of infringement. But not just infringement, willful infringement.
Willful. That is a very scary word in patent law.
It is, because it means the judge has the discretion to triple the damages. But the money wasn't even the real threat. The real threat was the injunction.
Explain what that means.
A judge, a man named James Spencer, was reportedly just fed up with RIM's arrogant attitude throughout the trial. He was on the verge of signing a court order that would have legally forced RIM to shut down the entire BlackBerry network in the United States.
Just turn it off.
Turn it off. Every BlackBerry in Washington, D.C., every lawyer in New York, every doctor on call dead. Instantly.
That sounds like a legitimate national security crisis waiting to happen.
It was. The situation got so dire that the U.S. Department of Justice and the Department of Defense actually had to intervene. They filed official briefs with the court saying, effectively, Your Honor, please do not turn this service off. The United States government cannot function without BlackBerry.
That is just wild. The government basically had to admit they were too addicted to the product to allow the normal legal process to take its course.
That intense pressure is what finally forced RIM to settle. In 2006, they wrote a check to NTP for $612.5 million.
Over $500 million.
It was a painful, painful check to write, but it kept the lights on. And it bought them the time they needed to enjoy that 2009 peak we talked about earlier.
But the government's relationship with BlackBerry wasn't always so supportive, was it? We talked about security before, about how unbreakable the encryption was. But there's a darker chapter here when it comes to privacy.
The great privacy paradox. BlackBerry's biggest selling point was that it was unhackable. But the problem is, if you were truly unhackable, authoritarian governments really, really hate you.
I'm seeing notes here about the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and India all threatening to ban the service.
Right. Around 2010, these countries and others issued ultimatums. They said terrorists and criminals are using BBM to communicate because we can't monitor it. You need to give our law enforcement agencies the encryption keys, or we are banning BlackBerry service in our country.
So open a back door for us or get out.
That's exactly what it was. And RIM was in a terrible bind. If they said no, they lose access to these massive, fast-growing markets. If they said yes, they completely destroy their global reputation for security.
So what did they do?
For the most part, they blinked. In most of those cases, they established servers within those countries that would allow for what's called lawful interception. They gave the governments a way in.
So the unbreakable shield definitely had some cracks in it.
And those cracks got a whole lot wider in 2013 with the Edward Snowden leaks.
Oh, boy. The NSA files.
The documents that came out were pretty damning. They revealed that the NSA and their British counterpart, GCHQ, had been successfully compromising BlackBerry data for years.
What specifically could they do?
The leaked documents suggested the NSA could read SMS traffic on BlackBerry devices and had found ways to decrypt some BlackBerry emails. But the British GCHQ had a program with the most incredible name, Scrap Heap Challenge.
Scrap Heap Challenge? That sounds like a monster truck rally.
It was a spoofing tool. It allowed British intelligence agents to send emails that looked like they came from a target's BlackBerry device.
So they could impersonate you in an email.
Yes. And perhaps the most technical, but also most concerning revelation was about a specific encryption algorithm called Dual EC DRBG.
That's a mouthful.
It's a random number generator that's used to create encryption keys. The U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, eventually had to warn people not to use it because it very likely contained a mathematical backdoor that had been put there by the NSA.
And BlackBerry was using it.
BlackBerry software supported this flawed algorithm long after these security concerns had been raised, and they didn't seem to issue any advisory to their customers about it. So while they were selling military-grade security to you and me, The big intelligence agencies potentially had a skeleton key the whole time.
It certainly complicates the whole security legacy. They were secure against maybe a corporate rival or a hacker, but not against the state.
That seems to be the case.
Okay, let's fast forward to the end game. We're talking about the years 2013 to 2016. This is the era of the Hail Mary passes.
It's the tragic final phase, really. The company knows it's bleeding users and money. They finally replaced the co-CEOs. Michael Azaritis and Jim Bolsilli are out. A new guy, Thorsten Heinz, comes in, and then later John Chen. And they bet the entire company on one last roll of the dice, BlackBerry 10.
I remember BlackBerry 10, the Z10, which was all touchscreen, and the Q10, which had the keyboard.
And you know what? The OS itself was actually pretty good. It had this feature called the Hub that aggregated all your messages, email, Twitter, Facebook, everything, into one single beautiful stream. It had a flow interface that was all based on gestures.
I remember trying a Z10 in a store. It felt modern, it felt fluid, but it also felt empty.
It was a ghost town. The app problem was never solved. Instagram wasn't there. Snapchat wasn't there. All the big games weren't there. And by 2013, if you didn't have the apps, you didn't have a viable smartphone. You just had a really nice pager with a web browser.
The classic case of too little too late.
Exactly. The sales were abysmal. They produced millions of Z10s that just sat in warehouses. They had to take a massive inventory write-down of nearly $1 billion on unsold phones. It was over.
So in a final act of desperation, they did the unthinkable. They surrendered to the enemy.
They adopted Android.
The BlackBerry Priv.
2015. The name Priv was supposed to stand for privacy and privilege. It was a slider phone. It looked like a normal Android slab, but the whole screen could slide up to reveal a classic physical BlackBerry keyboard underneath.
A Frankenstein's monster of a device.
It was actually kind of cool. I know people who loved it, but it was very expensive. And by that point, the brand was just cold. The magic was gone. People had moved on to Samsung and Apple.
And that leads us to what I call the zombie brand era, September 2016.
That's the date BlackBerry officially announced they would no longer design or manufacture their own hardware. They were completely out of the phone business.
Oh, wait a minute. I definitely saw new BlackBerry phones for sale after 2016.
You did. But they weren't made by BlackBerry in Waterloo. They were just licensing the name. A big Chinese electronics company called TCL picked up the global license. They're the ones who made the BlackBerry Key 1 and Key 2.
So it was just outsourced nostalgia.
Pretty much. And they were actually pretty solid phones. They ran Android, they had good keyboards, and amazing battery life. For the few remaining diehards, they were a lifeline. But even TCL eventually gave up the license in 2020. Then a small American startup called Onward Mobility promised a new 5G BlackBerry.
The vaporware era.
They promised it for years. And then in early 2022, they quietly announced they were shutting down without ever shipping a single unit. That was the final nail in the hardware coffin.
But, and this is a huge and important distinction we need to make, the company BlackBerry Limited is not dead.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They're very much alive and in some ways quite successful. They just pivoted completely. They went back to their original roots: security, software, and enterprise data.
So if you drive a modern car, there's a pretty good chance you're interacting with BlackBerry software right now.
Very likely. Their software division, called QNX, is the underlying operating system for the infotainment and safety systems in millions and millions of cars. Ford, Jaguar Land Rover, BMW, Mercedes, they all use it. It's real-time, it's incredibly secure, and it's crash-proof, which is what you want in a car.
So they went from being the phone in your pocket to being the hidden brain in your car's dashboard.
And they became a major cybersecurity consulting firm. And let's be honest, a bit of a patent troll themselves.
Right. I remember they sued Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.
They did. They basically argued, hey, that timeline interface you have, that messaging architecture with read receipts, we invented a lot of that. And they settled with Facebook for an undisclosed but likely very large sum of money. It was their way of collecting rent on the revolution they started but couldn't finish.
So to bring it all back home, we started this deep dive with the server decommissioning on January 4, 2022, the literal death of the hardware. But the legacy is just, it's everywhere.
It is. You absolutely cannot tell the story of the 21st century without talking about BlackBerry.
So what do you think is the lasting DNA? What did they leave behind?
I think it's two main things. First, the always-on expectation. The idea that your boss can email you at 8 p.m. and expect a reply. BlackBerry normalized that, the feeling of a phantom vibration in your pocket even when your phone isn't there. BlackBerry started that.
And the second thing?
Messaging. BBM proved that people craved instant, data-based, receipt-verified conversations on their phones.
Hmm.
WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, iMessage, they are all, at their core, just spiritual successors to BlackBerry Messenger.
It's such a bittersweet legacy, isn't it? They built the world we all live in now, but they didn't get to live in it themselves.
They built the train tracks, but the iPhone and Android were the slick, fast trains that everyone actually wanted to ride on.
I want to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought. BlackBerry died because they perfected a very specific paradigm, the physical keyboard on a communication device, and they refused to let go of it when the world shifted to a sheet of glass.
It's the classic innovator's dilemma. They were just too good at the old thing to be the ones to invent the new thing.
So look at your phone today. That perfect slab of glass, it feels permanent, doesn't it? It feels like this is the final, ultimate form of the phone. But is it?
History would suggest probably not.
Is there a tech giant today that is holding on too tightly to their own physical keyboard? Are we just one big breakthrough away? Maybe it's AI pins, maybe it's augmented reality glasses, maybe it's neural interfaces from looking at the iPhone the same way we now look at a BlackBerry 5810 with its clumsy headset.
You mean you had to actually hold it in your hand and touch it with your fingers? How primitive.
Exactly. The cycle continues. History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
It does indeed.
Next time you're watching those three little dots appear when someone is typing a message to you, just take a second and remember. You have a small Canadian pager company to thank for that specific brand of digital anticipation. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.